G'day everyone and welcome to my art channel Brushes with Beck. Today's video is another colour pencil drawing for you, and in this video I am drawing a Nankeen Kestrel. You can see the sketch here, and this is my colour selection of my different colour pencils that I'm using for this, plus a couple more that I added on towards the end. So I'm actually using something from all of my colour pencil ranges: Polychromos, Derwent Drawing, Derwent Coloursoft, Derwent Lightfast, and the Caran D'Ache Luminance. So there's a little bit of everything in this piece, and I've just recently organised my pencils into colour order rather than by brand, and that's actually last week's video if you want to check that out. And I made colour swatches to go with it to make colour selection much easier, and it was for this piece. So I am working on, this is Fabriano Studio hot pressed watercolour paper. It's a smoother paper than the Fabriano Artistico, just not as good quality, I suppose. I like to do smaller pieces on this sometimes, though I'm not a big fan of smooth paper, which you will know if you have been following me for a while. So to begin with, I'm just laying down these base layers on the wing and back of the bird. There's these beautiful subtle purplish tones in this image. It was quite a bit more apparent, but I did adjust the image before working on a drawing of it. So just laying in various colours. I've got burnt ochre, I think it's pale lavender, Herculaneum red, and burnt sienna 10% from various pencil sets, and just slowly building up that colour. I'm going in very lightly. You don't want to go in heavy on smooth paper, or you will not be able to add any more layers over the top. So I'm just using a light pressure and layering those colours one over the other to blend them together nicely to end up with a really nice colour tone at the end of it. Now I did find for this section of the bird that by the time I'd done the layering of these base layers and sort of getting this colour set in, that I wasn't quite sure where to begin. I felt a little bit lost with this section of the bird, knowing that I wanted the head to be the main focus. I wasn't sure how much detail I wanted to add in the wing, and it just felt a little bit overwhelming, so I moved on to another section of the bird once I'd finished those base layers. So as you can see, I'm adding in some pale blue colour here, and this is really important when you're working with subjects that have white in them, is that white is not always white in colour. In this image it's largely blue tones, a little bit of grey tones, and some creamy tones in the white areas as well. So it's important to take note of all those little subtle colour differences between the white areas in your image, and that will really help bring out your light and your shadow and get your tones correct, because only your very brightest whites are actually going to be white, such as the highlight in the eye, and those sorts of other little bits and pieces. So I'm just sort of mapping in areas of feathering and colour differences with these subtle tones. I'm not going in, apart from this really dark shadowed area, I'm just sort of trying to work out where everything is on my bird, trying to put it in place and make sure I get some of those colour tones in, mark my darker areas with those colours, and just try to place everything before working in a lot of detail. So I'm still working in the base layers for this section of the bird. I'm still building up colours to create the final tone before adding detail in over the top. Detail doesn't matter at this point, although if you want to, you can preserve white areas. That's very important. If you want some really bright whites in some feathered areas where you are using a lot of colour, you either need to use an indenting tool to indent the paper so the colour won't go into that area, or you should be laying in probably a white layer first of colour pencil, use your colour over the top, and then be able to remove that colour with a scraper or a slice tool to try and get some fine hairs on top there. I've never had much luck with that on Fabriano paper, and perhaps that's just my technique with not enough layers, but I don't have much luck with the scraping tool. I did try it briefly in this piece, but it didn't work. So I've chosen to not leave white feathered areas in terms of indenting tool for very fine feathers. I wasn't too worried about it, and you'll see later on what I do to create texture in those areas. So I love this area on the side of the face below the eye here. That was lovely to work on. Slowly building up that color in that area. I even had some blues in there, and I finished it off with the dark sepia, I believe. Now the beak itself is a dark indigo and an ice blue, I think, with a little bit of pale lavender on the side. There's no black in this beak. It doesn't need it. It is beautiful color tones here. So this beak is very straightforward. There's not a lot to it. I only used like a few layers of different colors. I laid in a dark indigo first and an ice blue, I think, and also went over with the nightshade color near the tip to really darken that up. And with a little bit of yellow and earth green underneath, it's come up really, really nicely. And you only need a few layers, like I said, to get that result on this smooth paper, and it does the trick. The values are there, what's needed is there, and it looks really, really nice. So just progressing through the picture as I have through the rest of it, just starting to add in some fine details in different areas. I really wanted to work in this eye because I thought once the other eye was done, I could then focus on finishing up the feathering and working out how much detail I needed to put in and how much I could leave as suggested detail, because I wasn't 100% sure how thorough I wanted to be, I suppose, especially on that wing and back area. So for the pupil, I only used two colors. I didn't use black. I think I just used dark indigo and dark sepia to get that pupil nice and dark, and it came up really, really lovely. And then I worked in the color of the iris around it with multiple layers there of a few different colors, and it came up really nice and curved and shiny looking, and I'm very pleased with the outcome on that one. So once that eye is in, it enables me to just go over and add in all these fine details. Nankeen Kestrels have lots of beautiful little texture in their feathers, I suppose. They've got those lovely little streaks. And this bird that I've photographed is actually a female because the top of her crown is rufous. In a male, that colour would be grey. So that's something to note if you are drawing wildlife or birds, especially in particular, that there are subtle differences between males and females often, and it's important to make sure that you draw everything as it is if you are wanting to keep it realistic, like reflect the actual bird or animal itself, and to make sure you get those details accurate, because a subtle change to those details can actually mean that you've drawn an animal incorrectly. If you're trying to draw that specific species and say this is this. But of course, if you're not too fussed about that, you can draw it any which way you like with any colours and change up the patterning and, do whatever you like, and it doesn't really matter. But I prefer to keep them as the birds, if that makes sense. So as I said, just moving through this piece and starting to add in those more final details, the streaking that's across the breast of the bird, and trying to get in some more feather details and work out exactly what I'm doing. Now the back of the bird, where all these markings are, and the wing, I went in with nightshade and dark indigo. It was quite difficult because it is very purple when I put the eyedropper over this image in Photoshop, but to have it very strongly purple in my drawing looks wrong, so I added dark indigo over the top, and then I believe I also added a cold grey 6 over the top of that, just to tone that colour down, the vibrance down a little bit, because it was a little bit strong for me, and I thought just adding in that cold grey, actually it might be dark sepia, one of the two, or both, I added it over the top just to tone down the strength of that colour a little bit. So going in, this is Caput Mortem Violet, and I'm going in to darken up some areas, add some details and shadows on this wing. And like I said again, I've got a little bit lost on this wing. I wasn't sure still how much detail I wanted to add. I added in some texture and it looked okay, but I wasn't 100% pleased with it. And so what I actually did is I used the Herculaneum Red, which was part of the base layers, and I went in over that entire back and wing area again, and not only made that colour more rich, but it also, which it needed to be, but it also softened up that detail that I'd added in on that wing, which I found was really important to make it so that detail was more subtle, so that it wasn't the wing wasn't the focus of the piece. So I know I'm talking about that while I'm not actually doing it because I'm adding in all these other details everywhere else. But I'm just starting that now. As you can see, that's the Herculaneum Red from Caran D'Ache Luminance, and it's blending out and softening up that wing area nicely while making that colour more vibrant like it needs to be and making that pop a little bit more. And then going over those purples a little bit and adding some white edges to the wings there. And as you can see, that's the finished piece. It's only a little one. It's only A6, this one. No, A6, A5. I'm not 100% sure. It's not very big, about 15 by 21 centimeters. So it was nice to work on a smooth paper, but not at a huge scale, because I do struggle with that large scale on smooth paper with my hand, but it was nice to get in those finer details around the head on this piece. So thank you very much for watching. I do hope you've enjoyed this video. If you did, please comment down below, give the video a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, and I will see you again next week for another video. Stay creative.